tell me this, how old do you feel you are? Do you have a sense of it?
I feel younger than I actually am. I'm 65 years old, but people now say that 60 is the new 40, and I'm tending to agree with that. I think I'm in good health. I feel good. I'm with my grandchildren frequently. Just go all the time, and so I don't feel like an old man, even though I've got my AARP card and I just filed for Social Security. So I'm officially old, but I definitely don't feel that way now.
Did you become aware at some point in your professional career when you were the oldest guy in the room and you had more experience than everybody else, and you just sort of became aware that everybody's looking to you for, you know, how we can get ourselves out of this one?
Well, there were two times in my career, as I look back on it, where I really became the senior supervisor in the room, or the senior officer. And it wasn't an official status, but as I look back on it, when I was a instructor at the training academy, I worked there for almost 10 years, and as time went on, when new instructors came in, the lieutenant would say, okay, you're the unofficial training officer. You make sure they get the training that they need. You monitor their classroom presentations, and when you tell me they're able to do the work, then they'll have a job here. And it felt good to know that I had proven myself to such a degree where I was looked at not only for the knowledge that I possess, but the ability to supervise and counsel and train someone to the standards that they wanted there. When I became the funeral coordinator for LAPD, over the years, starting off there, I knew nothing and had to be basically self-taught and learned a lot from experience. Although experience is not the best teacher, it is something that you can learn from. I learned how to do things wrong, or how to make things better after we did them many times, but that's part of the drill when there's no one around to give you guidance. So as the years went by, and I found myself in a position in the department where captains and commanders and deputy chiefs were calling me up and saying, John, I've got this problem. I got an officer who committed suicide. I have an officer who died. I have an officer whose parents died. All these death and dying issues, and I want to do things right. What do I do? And it felt good to realize that I had something to offer, which I wasn't able to do when I first started the job, but after I got a lot of training and education and experience and exposure to all the people needs that come out when someone dies, then it was I was able to respond to those questions in a way that it proved to be helpful and comforting, because they want to do the right things and they want to help people, and it made everybody feel better. Many times towards the end of my career as a funeral coordinator, I would arrive at the scene shortly after an officer was killed in the line of duty, and it felt good to have the captain come up and say, I'm so glad you're here. Thank heavens. Will you take over? And I, absolutely, Captain. And he had asked me, what do you want me to do? And I would give them a short list of things to do, and that was it. And they knew that everything else was going to fall into place, and I would keep them informed of what was going on. But they were visibly relieved that I was on scene, because they were in an environment that made them feel very uncomfortable, and they didn't want to deal with it.
You find that people were right up to the point of death, completely in their element, and then lost because of their dealing
their comfort zone's been violated. They know how to handle riots and disasters and shootouts and all kinds of things that police officers are trained to deal with and work with on a regular basis. But when an officer dies and they're confronted with trying to console people and trying to comfort people, and they're not sure what decisions they should be making and what decisions they should not be making, it frustrates them, because police officers by their nature are problem solvers. They want to come in, they look for the facts. Okay, let's make a decision. And when someone dies, the surviving family many times is looking for someone to make decisions for them, but those decisions they need to make about when the services should be held and where should it be held, and a whole list of things that they need guidance. They don't need instructions. And it's easy for a police chief to come in and say, well, okay, I'll make those decisions, and they do. And then many times after the funeral, I would meet and talk with families, and one of the questions I always try to ask at some point in time after the services, days, weeks, months later, was, now that it's all over and you look back on it, are you satisfied? Would you change anything? And repeatedly, where decisions were made for them, they complained that we didn't know we had these options. We felt like we were out of the loop. People came in and told us what we should do, and they told us where we should have the services, and they told us how things should be. And we didn't want to be confrontational, and we didn't want to feel selfish, and they were so in command of themselves. We felt like, well, they know what they're doing, and we don't, so maybe we should let them make these decisions. But in reality, the chief should have slowed down and asked them, what do you want? And here's what we have to offer, and try to integrate the two things so we meet everyone's needs.
It's almost antithetical to what police officers usually do. Is someone who is indecisive is usually someone who they have a antagonistic sort of relationship to, or they want to take charge,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to go from being the dominant to being collaborative, and it's difficult.
They're not used to it, and everyone's watching them, and they really want to. They want to help the family. I think the one thing that I have encountered repeatedly is when I contact agencies and the death occurred, and within just a couple of days they're having a funeral. And I always, when I encounter these situations, I ask the funeral coordinator or the chief, whoever I can get hold of at the agency, well, why did you have the funeral so soon after the death? And I've had many chiefs tell me, well, I wanted the family to have closure, and so I made the decision. The officer died on Sunday. We can have the services on Wednesday. He says, I asked the key people, can you be ready by Wednesday? And they all said yes. But closure is not synonymous with burial. Closure is part of this bereavement process that people typically go through at some point in time on their own. And it's, it's one aspect of the whole grief process, and it's not something that happens when you close the lid on the casket. And there's chiefs that just think that they're helping the family by doing this, but in reality, they're really not. And so those issues become very, very important, that the chiefs have to realize they don't have to make decisions in the first few hours after the death. It's time for everyone to calm down, get some professional advice. There's limitations, there's parameters you want to work within, obviously, but at the same time, families don't have to start making those decisions right away. And they're going to be looking for people to make those decisions for them because they're uncomfortable. No one plans on making funeral plans, and they don't know what to do. So, but they need guidance. They don't need instructions, and people will just work with them for a day or two. You can guide them through the process, and they'll make the decisions that they want, so that when it's all done, it's all over, and they look back on it, they say, yeah, we knew what our options were, we had sufficient time to make the decisions, we were guided through the process and not given instructions, and best of all, we feel very, I can't say glad, but we're very satisfied that everything went as well as we could hope for. And we have no doubts or no criticism of everything that happened. As compared to a family that looks back on it and says, oh man, we were rushed and we didn't know we had these options, and we didn't know about this and we didn't know about that, and you know, we're not pleased at all, because those are memories you don't want the family to have.
Is there something that strikes you that has added to your sensibilities from having done this and having been in the presence of death so much more, I would say exponentially more than the average person? Is there something that you have drawn from this experience that has given you insight, wisdom that you've applied to other parts of your life?
I have acquired I can't say an understanding because I don't understand it, but I have acquired a belief in almost a supernatural, because I've encountered so many situations that can't be explained. The officer that I helped at one time, whose wife was dying of cancer, and she was in hospice care at his home, and I had gone out to his house, met his wife, and she wanted to plan her own funeral, and she knew she was dying, and so we had that meeting. I went back several times afterwards, and she was starting to get worse and worse and worse every day. Kept in touch with him and her, and then within a few weeks she died, and I was talking with him after the death, and I went out to help him make the arrangements, and he said, John, he says, I slept in a bed in the same room with her, but she had her hospital bed, and there was a space between us, and something woke me up and told me to go and hug her, and she died in his arms. So how do you explain that type of phenomena? I don't think you can. I think it's there. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't, but strange things happen. And how do these people communicate? I think love is a big issue right here. That has to be someone you're very attached to. But I've heard of accounts like that, and I've experienced a couple, and I just don't have an answer for it. And I think it's just absolutely phenomenal that it can happen. So I don't discount people that tell me these types of stories, because I think they can happen. We've heard of miracles happening, almost medical miracles, about people that come out of comas or are cured of a disease and no one understands why. And that's just the point, is that they happen and no one can explain how they happen. But all the hundreds of families that I've helped, there's been these underlying beliefs that there's a lot of hidden power there somewhere. There's something going on that we don't understand, and we should accept it.
This death has obviously not become so callous to you that you have become. It's still an emotional. You still are able to become emotionally involved in it. And of course, I've seen that. And is it important for someone to have? I mean, obviously it shows that you have a soul, and this is that you have not just sort of clicked on this facade where you're able to just do it, but you still are able to be touched by humanity and all of this, or it could have very easily made you
And that's what we were taught in the police academy, that when you experience death, when you experience mayhem and all the gore out there in the field, that it's not real. I mean, it's just a body. There's nothing. I mean, you can't dwell on it. You can't show your emotions when you're working in the field. No one's going to respect or comply with a police officer that's standing there crying over a dead body. So you have to come up, you have to be unemotional, and then you have to do your job. And that's one side of it, and that's true. You can't be an emotional police officer at a tragic scene. You have a job to do, and you have to make some very difficult decisions, and you have to do your work. But at the same time, there comes a point in time when you have to realize that you're dealing with people, when you're dealing with other police officers, and it's okay to show your emotions. It's okay to show that you care. And that's the problem with a lot of police officers, is they can't step from one side of the road to the other. That they take this callousness, this objectivity, and put it into their personal life and their home life, and then they don't care, or they appear not to care, and that causes a lot of problems too. One example comes to mind. I got called out one night. A officer's young daughter, who was 14 years old, had committed suicide in his house. And I responded, and I worked with the officer and his wife and did what I do as a funeral coordinator. The coroner came, and the young lady was taken away to the funeral home, and there was a couple of police officers there that were doing the death investigation, which is normal, and they had a sergeant there. And so after they got all done and we're all getting ready to leave, we'd been there for hours and hours, I asked the sergeant, I said, can I talk to your officers for a few minutes just to see how they're dealing with this tragedy? And he says, tragedy? He says, shit, it's good training for them. He said, they had a job to do, and they came in and they did it. I said, okay, can I still talk to them? He said, well, if you have to. Yeah, go ahead. So I asked this sergeant if I could talk to his officers, and he said, yeah, if you have to, go ahead. So I went outside, and they were just climbing into their car, so they were sitting in the front seat. So I went over to the driver's side, and I stooped down, and they knew who I was. I had introduced myself and been interacting with them for the last couple of hours. And I said, hey, I just want to see how you guys are handling this. This is really a tragedy, and are you guys doing okay? And they sat there, and there was a moment of silence, and then the passenger officer looked down, because he couldn't see me because I was up a little bit. He looked down and looked over me and said, I have a daughter that age, and I wonder what would happen if that happened to my daughter, to even think about committing suicide, much less commit the act. And then there was silence again, and the driver officer looked at me and said, yeah, this is really the shit, sir. This is horrible. And I said, okay. I said, you guys hold any calls on your computer? They checked, and they said, no, we're clear. I said, why don't you go down to the local coffee shop and take a break and just talk with one another, because you both have a lot of feelings about the situation. If you feel comfortable with it, and just share. And the driver looked at me and said, we can do that? And I said, yeah, I'm a sergeant. I'm giving you an order, okay? Go take a break. Show it as a sergeant's call on your log. Put my name there, and go down, and while it's still fresh, go down and realize that you both are human beings, and you want to share a little bit, whatever you feel comfortable with. And they looked at each other and said, cool. And away they went. But their sergeant wasn't going to, one, ask them how they were feeling, or to take a break, or if they needed any kind of support or anything to help them through this tragic time. And so that's the culture that we have to deal with. as a young officer, I had a call back in the early 70s where my partner and I got a call to assist the fire department for a drowning. And we got there was a daycare where they had a pool and the gate had been left open, and three little guys, like a year, 18 months old, had fallen in the pool and drowned. And we got there before the ambulance did. So we had 3 infants up on the side of the pool, and there's 2 of us, and we knew they needed CPR, but how do you choose? So we're trying to get the couple other adults that were there to grab one and do like we're doing and do all these things. And then a few minutes later, the ambulance showed up, you know, and it was horrible. And all 3 of those infants died. But when it was over, my partner, I had just a couple years on the job. He had well over 20 years. When it was all over and everything, and detectives came out and did the investigation, we were interviewed and everything. We went out we got in our car, and he said, "Okay, pick up the microphone and clear. We got to get back to work." I'm going, "Excuse me?" And he said, "No." He said, "We got to go back to work. That's the way it's done." Okay, so we went back to work. I never talked about that with anybody for years and years and years, because that was the standard. That was the culture, that you don't want to let anybody know that
2 hours.
you got feelings.
2 hours after that would have been so productive.
Oh yeah.
And the cost
But
benefit of doing that.
at that time, the department didn't have peer support program. They didn't have department psychologists. And definitely officers weren't going to talk with one another unless you were really, really close. And he and I weren't that close. He was my training officer, and I was the new kid on the block. So it was a whole different time. But still, officers have to know that they're human, and there's opportunities for them to be human.
When you think of the word wisdom, what do you think of?
You asked me this question earlier, and I've been pondering how I would respond. And I look back, and I can't think of anyone who has been referred to as a wise man or a wise person that isn't old. I don't think wisdom is something that young people can be or can have. They can be intelligent, they can be smart, they can have a lot of things going for them. But wisdom is an accumulation of all these things that takes time to gather, time to experience, time to put together and build my character. And my character is my moral compass in life. And through my daily life experience and my life experience and my education and my religion and my relationships and how I look at life, I have to have this moral compass that keeps me going in the right direction. Because I've never heard of any evil person in history being referred to as a wise person. You know, they may have been intelligent, they may have been able to organize feuding tribes or whatever into some kind of army or political empire or something. That doesn't mean that they were necessarily a wise person or had a lot of wisdom, because their moral compass was going in the wrong direction. So I think looking at my life, that as you get older, you can become a very wise person, but it's not a guarantee, but it's something that is an accumulation of many aspects of life, but they have to be the positive things. They have to be virtues. They have to be those qualities of life things that make life better. They have to be those things that contribute to helping everybody, my family, my neighborhood, my community, my police department, whoever I'm involved with, contribute to everybody doing good things. And I think that's kind of, if I'm going to try and define what wisdom is, I think that's how it is. It's not a single event. It's not a single thing that makes people wise, but I think it comes with age. But with that age has to come an open-mindedness to learn and to discriminate right from wrong, and to always try and do the right thing.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Uh,
Very nice.
well, you always